right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Bluewater Cruising podcast. Super excited today to have Dr./Captain Bret Ribotsky here with me. I've known Bret for a while now, for maybe even over a year that over a year ago we met. Bret was one of the first students, one of the first clients we had when we first launched the Bluewater Cruising program. He is a captain and a doctor, and he's got some Bluewater cruising experience under his belt. He's got all kinds of wild and wonderful and somewhat painful stories, I'm sure, that he's going to share with us around cruising and a bunch of other stuff. So, Bret, I know your story, even leading up to cruising, is quite an interesting one. In the way that you got into it and your medical background, and then your background in I think it was like the Coast Guard Auxiliary or something that you were with, and how you went through that process and then ended up cruising. I don't want to steal your thunder on that. I want to hand that over to you to share that, because I think you do a great job of explaining it. And so, yeah, I'll pass it over to you, and maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into cruising, and what brought you to it.
Well, thank you. It's almost, how do I get 90 minutes into like 4 or 3 to make it exciting? But I was born in South Florida. You look out my balcony, that's the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show takes place right behind me. That's the International Swimming Hall of Fame Tower right over there that the people jump off of. I've been living in South Florida. I've been a boater since well before I was driving a car. I was water skiing and taking people out at 12, 13 years old. So went boating my whole life, tried out for the Cypress Gardens water ski show. I didn't get in when I was 17, so I went to college instead. And needless to say, moved on, college, medical school, practicing foot and ankle surgeon, podiatrist in South Florida. I originally worked for the Cleveland Clinic, set up my own office, been doing that for quite a while. And life gets boring, you have kids, and things get mundane and routine. So I said, what would be fun and exciting? I like boating. My spouse at the time was a dermatologist. She hates the sun. She hates going boating with me. So I decided, let's join the auxiliary, the Coast Guard Auxiliary. It'll be fun. I'll get to hang out with boating people. And it's kind of cool to stand 15 feet under a helicopter, 5 miles offshore. The wind is, 85 knots or so under the helicopter. It's spinning you around, hurricane force winds. Kind of fun. So we used to do all these fun exercises. When you see the Coast Guard people come and rescue people on a sailboat or anywhere, they practice somewhere. Well, I was the guy they used to practice with. And me and a bunch of friends, and we became good lifelong buddies. Well, one day while I was volunteering with the Coast Guard during National Safe Boating Week in 2015, the guy driving the boat had a scotoma, a blind spot. He crashed into the jetties going into one of the inlets here in South Florida. I was knocked unconscious, broke most of the bones in both feet, both ankles, my knee, my hip, L1, L2, L3, herniated a bunch of discs in my neck, broken ribs, concussion. Left me about a year in a wheelchair, in and out of surgery. I finally got done. I lost my practice. My hand tremors ever so slightly. Couldn't be a surgeon anymore. Now what do? Well, one, I don't let anyone else drive the boat. Let me get that real, especially where they can hit stuff. I don't let anyone else go. If you can hit something, you ain't touching my boat. If we're out 20 miles offshore, you can drive all you want. But close, no chance. I can't even get in a cheap Uber because I'm terrified of the guy driving. If I'm going to take an Uber, it's going to be somebody with a little more experience. So I got more into boating. And I've owned boats most of my life. Power boats I've been. I have an Aquila powercat.
I want to stop you right there for a sec, just because I'm like, you tell me the story about how you're in the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and then this guy drives into the jetty, and you're in the hospital for how long?
Almost a year.
Almost a year in the hospital from a boating accident. And your decision when you recover from that is to get more into boating.
Well, true. Well, let's be reasonable. We're boaters.
Okay.
We're not smart people. We're not smart people. Smart people don't do this. Smart people don't leave land. I mean, I can tell you, you're out there on your boat. Amazon does not show up. Uber Eats does not show up. These are like big inconveniences. So we're not smart people. We're adventuresome people. And again, boat is spelled B-O-A-T-T. Break out another 10,000. I want you to recognize that.
We've upped that from the old school break out another 1,000.
Oh yeah,
You've added another
we
T.
can thank our another T. We got to change. Our environment has changed. So I got out. I like boating. I wanted escapism. Let's say.
Okay.
I mean, that's probably the ultimate level of escapism. So I was saying I had an Aquila powercat. I bought that boat. Thinking, okay, I'll put in the charter program. I'll use it 6 weeks a year. It'll be a lot of fun. I got delivery on it on a Sunday in Clearwater, Florida, by Tampa. I helped the captain bring it across the state of Florida. I got off the boat. It went off to the BVIs. I came home. 3 days later, the wife comes down with pancreatic cancer. So the next 4 years is spent, again, she was a dermatologist. So we traveled. We lived in Johns Hopkins, which is Baltimore, Florida. We lived in La Jolla, California. Wherever there were treatments to try to prolong and save her, we did. Unfortunately, we lost the battle after just about 4 years, which is a long amount of time. But now here I am. I own a boat in the BVIs. I'm ready to start doing something. And while I had a lot of boating experience, I have a 100-ton captain's license. I've had for a long time, master captain's license. I have book smarts. I don't have practical smarts. And how do you get that? Is my secret to life is I can either figure it out or I can find somebody as a coach who's done it before and milk their brain. I met Keith probably 4 or 5 years ago at the Miami Boat Show. And then we hung out. We went to a couple events together afterwards. And we got along reasonably well. And then when he started doing this class, I got intrigued to join this. I didn't know Chris at the time. I didn't know Chris was more fun than Keith. That's at you, Keith. Just want you to know that. But, when you have a problem, you have a question, these guys picked up the phone. They're there to be your coach, let's say, through the next environment. And we're talking about things I've done. I originally flew to the BVI, spent 2 to 3 weeks trying to get my boat ready with the mechanics, taking it out of charter, learning so much about what can happen, what can go wrong, how they put lipstick on a pig. When they paint over rust and then it rusts again and they paint over rust again, and you're looking at rust lasagna when you start going in and picking off stuff. You start finding things, and you make sure when you buy your boat, there's things you want to check out. And I break it down to there are items that are critical and items that aren't. Like, I have 3 bathrooms on my boat. If one goes bad, I got 2 others. It isn't a mission critical item for me. But if the windlass thing that pulls up the anchor doesn't work, how do I get the anchor back up? I mean, it's not a sailboat, so I don't have winches. You need to have backups for everything. What can go wrong? Solenoids. So I like to approach this, and Chris and I'm sure we'll talk into that for a while. I don't know if people have seen my medical video, the thing we did about 6-8 months ago on that, but you should let people do that. I hope that was valuable for people. But approach this, the anal doctor brings all this equipment with him, and the real reality to all this is that none of it's going to help me. Because if I get the injured one, nobody else knows how to do it. So the reality in medical equipment and stuff you bring with you is, how do I keep you stable enough until I can get help?
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of the other video we did, of talking about, you just need to buy a day. It's a day until somebody gets to you.
Yeah,
for the most part, unless you cross the Pacific.
There's a lot. I want to kind of slow it down a bit, because there's a lot we can get into there. You've touched on a number of different things. Your background getting into this, from the accident that you had to going through the cancer with your wife, losing your wife, which, again, my condolences on that. That's I can't imagine that, going through something like that. And I just think, hearing your story, every time I hear your story, I'm just like, you have this resilience about you, where you're just like, it doesn't matter what happens to you. You go through these things like almost like back to back, yet you were still like, all right, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to get on the boat, and I'm going to go out, and I'm going to start cruising. We haven't even touched on the most recent, bomb.
Chris knows where we're going in this, but you thought that was bad. It gets a little bit beyond that. I mean, nothing. I mean, I'm happy that the cancer is a miserable thing, and by the time you get to the end of it, her passing away is a blessing because the pain is gone.
Right.
But now I'm a single doctor with hair who has a couple boats. it's not that tough to find people to hang out with you. I'll give you that.
Sounds good. So the boat that you ended up, because you ended up with a boat before I met you. I mean, you knew Keith, but you had a boat before I met you. Is that the same PowerCat that you're talking about here, or is it?
Yes.
It's the same PowerCat.
Yeah.
So that boat was in
It's the
charter.
same path.
Yeah.
I bought it in 2017.
Right.
Before I bought it in 2017, and I like the concept, the power cat. I always liked the sailing, but I'm 60 years old.
Yeah.
After I got injured, there's some strength factors that go with this. There's, everything looks really good when the electronic winches work, but when they don't, it's a different game.
Yeah.
And you got to be prepared for that. You got to know, how am I going to handle the unexpected?
Yeah.
Because if you're not expecting it, it's going to happen, guaranteed.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that'll be interesting for some people. There's a lot of people that have this question: should I go with a sailing catamaran or a monohull or whatever kind of sailboat, or do I go with some sort of a power boat, whether that's a PowerCat or a trawler? And you've just alluded to a couple of reasons why you did it. Is there anything else there? Any other reasons why you chose to go the PowerCat route? Pros and cons.
Obviously, pros and cons. If you look at all the people who have bought Flemings and outer reefs and big trawlers, they all tended to be sailors earlier in their life. So so when you talk to them, why don't you buy a sailboat now? It's too much work, and you get to a point in life where you don't want to do it. I mean, if you're 40, early 50-year-old, great shape, all that stuff, you like doing this stuff, fine. I'm pretty mechanically inclined in a little space inside of somebody's ankle or foot. But, now I have to get big wrenches and big tools and then of course you climb in the hull. I'm not a small guy, so it's hard. You got to do boat yoga to get into the spaces. I mean, these boats are all built in Asia by people who can fit in these little things. Keith, you watch Keith fit in the room. I want to see the video from Renee of him trying to get in and trying to get out. They don't show you that video on his webpage of him grunting and how does he fit and all those things. So it's that own issue. I think the second thing is that if you're planning to cross an ocean, you need a sailboat, or you need a Fleming, or you need one of these explorer boats that are going to hold 2,000 gallons of fuel. And
you're going to spend a lot of money
unless you're really rich and unless you've never done this before. I think when you really put it out, and Keith and I did this, I think when we did the class originally, that if you were going to stay, East Coast United States, the Bahamas, the Caribbean, come back, you'll probably break even between a sailboat and a motorboat. Yes, you're going to pay for fuel, but you're not going to pay for sails. You're not going to pay for all the blocks that are going to go bad and all the lines of Dyneema that go bad along the course of all this. So it breaks out. And with a motorboat, you point where you want to go and you go.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of this weather constraints.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
We'll talk about some of my trips.
Yeah.
About
I'd like to dive into a little bit of that, just because I know some people have questions around. Even I have questions around. It's like when you do it with a power boat, because I have a sailing cat as well. That's how I did it. But when you do it with a PowerCat, what are you really looking at?
You have a power boat with sails.
That's true. I do have two engines.
You have a power boat with sails.
Yeah. But I sailed a lot. And that's the thing. I think you need to be really clear about just how much you actually plan to sail. Because I know people that buy sailing catamarans that don't sail them. They just motor them everywhere. And if you're going to do that, then why would you just not buy the PowerCat? But I do have some questions around, like, what do you actually spend in your fuel burn to get, let's say, somewhere in the Caribbean and back? Like, what are you looking at? Like, yeah,
about a gallon. I did about a gallon a mile.
A gallon a mile.
There's no real reason to go fast unless you have to go. Right.
Okay.
There's no real reason to go fast unless you have to go fast.
Right.
So if I don't need to be there, I can still going 8 to 10 knots, burning 10 gallons an hour, or 10, somewhere in that. If I cut down to 6 or 7 knots, I'm getting 1.4, 1.5 miles per gallon, nautical miles. Also, be careful when you get these reports from people who sell you boats.
Yeah.
Very often they'll give you the range and the distance in statured miles. Remember, it's 15% greater.
Yeah, nautical miles.
All of a sudden, this boat gets 1.8. Be real careful of that when you're looking to buy a boat. and or use one. Watch, the boat obviously looks much better if you use snatcher miles.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So, that's something to keep in mind. So it's cheaper to run, relatively speaking. Fuel's expensive. I paid, I think my high was 7.60 a gallon,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
that's
That's
pretty high when
super high.
you start putting in a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, today it's running, five something here in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm sure the Bahamas, I heard it was 660, 670. So it isn't that much less, but it's still a lot of money for fuel.
Yeah.
The dock space looks cheap after you buy the fuel.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Okay.
So, so
So okay,
go ahead.
so maybe you mentioned a couple of times this medical workshop that we did together in the course, and that's inside of our course. But I think the people that are watching this, some of them, well, this goes up on our YouTube, so those people aren't necessarily in the course. So for the benefit of the people that aren't in our course, do you want to share really quickly? I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just a couple of things that you've learned along the way, high level stuff that's like, this is
Okay.
these are the do not leave homes without, or the do not leave homes without doing when it comes to
Right.
cruising and healthcare and being prepared.
Okay. Okay. My position as a physician is I got to keep you alive and stable until help shows up. I mean, in some capacity, somebody falls and slips their back, you need to be able to splint them. Somebody breaks an arm, a leg, you need to be able to splint them. You need to wrap up an open wound so it doesn't get infected. You want to be able, somebody, passes out, you want to be able to start an intravenous. I also help teach the medical person in command course at MPT, Maritime Professional Training here in Fort Lauderdale. And I would find some sort of 1 day class or 2 day class how to start an IV. Again, as I said in this other workshop we did, the best thing to do is to bring a doctor or nurse with you on your voyage. Safest thing you can do is bring somebody who already knows what they're doing. The big things you're never going to see. I mean, I had, bottles of Novocaine, lidocaine to make things numb. I had sutures. I had wound care kits. I brought things for punctured wounds of the lungs. I mean, I had my medical bag looks like most people's carry-on bag. When they go to the airport, it was stuffed with stuff. I have an AED, one of those automatic, put on your
Defibrillators.
chest and yell clear. Defibrillators. I had an intubation kit so I could put a tube down your throat. The funniest thing is that none of that stuff's going to save me because if it ever went bad, who's going to do it to me?
Yeah.
I'm kind of stuck.
Yeah.
It was okay when the last wife was a doctor. I could probably survive.
So you can have the gear, but if you don't have the training, there's no point in really having the gear, which is why you say
Right.
that
There's no
the best thing is to have a doctor or nurse on board. Maybe the second best thing is to
Right.
have a doctor or a nurse in the buddy boat pod that you're traveling
Buddy
in.
boat.
And the third best thing is if you don't have that, have a doctor or nurse in somewhere in shore support that you're able to call
Right.
and have some training.
I mean, we live in a world today with your Iridium phone. You can call anybody, and if you have Starlink or KVH or one of those systems, you're going to video with somebody, so you can show them what's going on and they can help you. You just need to not be squeamish, which is actually hard because some people see blood and they pass out, and some people see things, and people step up. It's interesting, but when I was at the Veterans Hospital as a resident, we used to track on the board who would faint. Marines, Army, Air Force, and it was a thing. Marines by far fainted more than anyone else when you drew blood on them. They were the ones, and they would tell you stories about bayonets and stuff in World War II and Korea that they would do. It was strange that they were the ones who would pass out more commonly, almost 2-1. Air Force was second worst, and all that.
Be interesting to do a study on why that is.
Well, everybody's different. The tough alpha male ego, high adrenaline, high this, see something, oh shit. And it's a lot different when it's you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're not used to seeing blood, you're not used to seeing blood. And few people are used to seeing blood. So a fireman, a policeman, those kind of people have seen these sort of things.
Right.
The great news about the cruising community, especially if you stay where there's a lot of boats, there's somebody who can do everything.
Yeah.
You will find, you go to Georgetown, Exuma, I mean, everything from getting your taxes done to your teeth pulled. Hopefully not by the same guy. But there's somebody there who can do everything. There's a dentist. There's a lot of pilots. There's I was shocked. Somebody who owned a gold mine, who had the coolest boat. He had the only boat I ever. He had a Leopard 45, tricked out more than anything I've ever seen. I should send Chris the pictures. He had a cup warmer to keep his coffee cups warm because he didn't want to pour espresso into a cold cup. He had a Malay cup holder, Miele, the expensive brand. His boat actually looked like it was a foot underwater because he had so much weight on it.
Oh, that's funny.
And you contact me, I'll give you his. You can follow him. He's actually now heading for the Panama Canal after having his engines changed. He had them upgraded because they weren't strong enough for all the weight he put in his boat.
Right. Right.
So they do these things.
Okay.
So back to our medical things. Let's get to the things you're going to see. People don't sunburns, insect bites. These are things that you're going to deal with every single day, especially if crew. Seasickness, I think we talked about in the class. You should have, if there's a treatment for seasickness, buy it. Because, Bonine might work on somebody, Dramamine on somebody else, vodka on somebody else. Who knows what it is, but you want to have everything. The wristbands, the patch behind the ears, the scopolamine, all that stuff. Finding a doctor who you're friendly with who will write you a stack of prescriptions, and then go to something like if you're in the States, go to Good RX and look up each one of those and say, which place can I get all these prescriptions the cheapest? Because insurance isn't going to cover them because you don't have a diagnosis for this problem yet.
Right.
So, you can find a lot of this stuff generic and stuff, and you don't need a lot. I mean, you need some things to, stop your stomach from moving. You get stomach poison. You want some Bentyl to slow down your stomach things. You need 2 or 3 antibiotics, Band-Aids, waterproof dressings, things you think you need a lot of. There's a lot of sources. And I think, Chris, we worked on a list together of a whole bunch of stuff that the class has.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a list for a first aid kit to put a first aid kit together, a proper first aid kit. And there's the sources that you can buy those just off the shelf too. So, okay. I mean, that's awesome, man. I mean, that's a really great, just lots of gems and golden nuggets of things to consider and think about medical wise. I want to come back really quick to your story. So, you went through these challenging experiences. You got the boat. And then what was it like? What was it that made you decide to work with us, just out of curiosity, as far as, you had your boat already and you'd had this Coast Guard experience.
Had a captain's license.
Yeah.
And I had a captain's license and I had all this.
Yeah.
Why would I do it? I'm a firm believer that success leaves clues.
Okay.
So I want to find somebody, you can either figure out how to do something and bang your head against the wall 10,000 times and you will figure it out. Doesn't matter what the problem is, you will figure it out. Or you can find somebody who knows the road ahead. They've been there. And I think the ability, time versus money is, money you will be able to earn, the government will take it from you, inflation will kill it, the stock will fall, but your time you never get back again. And until you get hurt and you have a loss of a dear partner, you don't realize how precious every moment is. And while, yes, I could learn and I could go crew on a couple people's boats and get 1,000 or 2,000 miles that way, that's going to take time. Where I can accelerate it is effectively, learning is, they say knowledge is learning from your mistakes and wisdom is learning from the mistakes of others. And I'd much rather become wise learning what Chris and Keith did wrong. I mean, at some point, Chris and Keith didn't know what they were doing.
We're all still learning.
Right.
Everybody's still learning. That's the great thing, I think. I mean, to me, it's one of the coolest things about the sailing, the whole lifestyle of blue water cruising is you could do this for the rest of your life and never figure it all out. You're just constantly learning more about better ways to do it, more efficient ways to do it, more comfortable ways to do it, more cost-effective ways to do it. What do you value in this lifestyle? What do you not value out of it? So
I'd like to believe that everybody's an absolute master at a very small slice of life.
Yes.
And if I could add a couple more slices to my knowledge by having Chris's brain and Keith's brain and Troutman's brain from Delos and a bunch of other people's, I get a nice piece of cake.
Yeah.
Or pie.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it.
So, you're never going to know it all. And as soon as you think you know it all, God will mess with you.
That's very, very true. That's in my experience as well. The instant that I think that I've got something figured out, the plan is it's like a sledgehammer to the face. Hey, you shouldn't be thinking that. Okay, so you yeah, you came through the course and then you headed out.
So we start how I
What?
how I start to do this. So I got my boat. I brought it back. I went to Tortola. I spent a couple weeks there figuring it out. I flew some friends to come join me for a ride back.
Okay.
And I've done some delivery captain work in the past, but that was, you run 24/7. You sit on the boat, and normally they're new boats, so nothing goes wrong with them. Not always, but nothing normally. And if something goes wrong with them, it ain't your problem.
Mm.
You get towed in, show up somewhere, you fly out, and somebody else has to fly and fix it and help deliver the boat or something of those that way. When it's your boat, you have to be responsible for each one of the steps along the way. You're responsible for everything that goes on the boat. You're worried about, trying to go to sleep and let somebody else drive is terrifying. The first time you do that,
when,
especially if there's near shit you can hit.
when it's your boat.
You know,
Yeah.
you, when it's your boat, it's a different thought. I mean, on a cruise ship, I don't worry too much. I assume they know what they're doing. But but in the last 2 years, we've had what, 3 cruise ships run aground in the Dominican Republic. We had one. We've had a bunch of cruise ship people who know what they're doing, no longer doing it anymore because they really didn't know what they were doing.
Mm.
So you can't always depend on anyone else. So you're getting ready to leave. What do you need? I need everything that's mission critical. What is mission critical? Well, I realize I got 2 engines. So if one goes bad, I can still make it on the other engine. So I got it. They're kind of redundant. The fuels are separate. I'm not worried that much about that. The bathrooms, as I talked about, I got a backup. I needed something. What if I can't pull the anchor up? What if the air conditioning goes bad? What if the refrigeration system goes bad? Uh, which was problem number one on my trip. I had the refrigeration guy come out, check my refrigeration system, my isotherms. They said they were perfect. He charged me $500 to tune them up or whatever. And we left from Fort Lauderdale to go to Bimini. And the second day, the electricity, it stopped working. Now, fortunately, from Chris and class, I realized I need a backup. I bought one of those Dometic things as a freezer. But I was planning to be out for a couple months. That's not, I mean, I get $1,000 in meat probably sitting there. And I'm trying, I had a part flown in. I tried to be my own mechanic, put it back together, didn't work. So I actually came home from Bimini back to Fort Lauderdale, back across the Gulf Stream, back checking through customs. And my boat's not is foreign registered. My boat was made in China, and if you bring it to the United States, there's a 25% tariff added to it. So it would cost $200,000 in taxes to make it a U.S. registered vessel. So it's registered in Jamaica. But if you come back into the U.S., you have to go through that whole process, which is a lot more convoluted.
Yep.
It's a whole other video on how to get through that system. But now you leave again. So back here for 4 or 5 days, you lose a weather window. I get the mechanics to come fix my refrigeration, and off we go back to Bimini. And good time. And then from Bimini, we move off to, cross over to the Berry Islands, over the Bahama Flats. Beautiful. I got some videos that, I mean, really breathtaking. You can't put into words the experience of like, I did this.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a cool feeling. And there's a couple moments along life when you do that. I remember the first time I pulled into Nassau Harbor, where all the cruise ships go, and I'm driving to park my boat in Atlantis. There was a really cool feeling. I kind of wish my dad was alive, because we used to go on cruises when I was a little kid, and now I'm actually driving my own boat into that area. I mean, sometimes you get to feel that ring of bell of victory. First time you don't see land behind you when you turn around. It's a pretty scary thing. Yeah, I told everyone on the boat, listen, we're never more than 2 or 3 miles from land. And they go, how can that be? I said, look down. We're never that far away. It's all relative to your attitude. You can either wake up in the morning, decide to have a good day, or you can wake up and listen to other people and have a lousy day. And as you get a little bit older, you decide not to give control of your life to other people. So you go and you enjoy all these things. And I don't know if you want to go into it, you see things, you spend more money than you think you're going to spend. But once I got there, I wound up buddy boating with all these guys who are sailboats. I met some YouTube people. I met some non-YouTube people. I met some ludicrously wealthy super yacht people who would come on my boat for the afternoon to ride around and have their super yacht of 160 feet catch us later because they had more fun with me than they did on their super yacht. Now, I asked them if we could switch, and that didn't happen yet. So who knows one day? But you have a good time.
Yeah.
There's something about being at the helm, even though you never drive your boat. The autopilot does.
Yeah.
You know, having two autopilots, that seems a little crazy for me being in the Bahamas and where I was planning to go. But if I had to cross an ocean, that's a redundant system you absolutely need. Like how you have to have a way to fix a sail, the way you have to have. I had extra water pumps. I had extra starter pumps. I probably have $5,000 in pieces of equipment I've never touched and never used. And
Yeah. You're prepared.
that's what insurance is
Yeah.
for.
You're prepared.
You're
You're
and
prepared.
then when you get to Georgetown, somebody always wants the parts that you brought.
Yeah.
And then you're in this thing. Well, I don't want to sell it to them, but yet at the same token, I don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
But I feel bad for them that they need it. But
But you're prepared.
I don't want to be without it.
Yeah.
I don't want to be without it. So it's like, okay, when can you get me a replacement part? How long will it take you? Can I go 10 days without it? Okay, here's my starter motor. Or here's, the backup part for the outboard engines. Or here's the cooling system or the water filter system or all those things. Keep the things that keep you alive.
Yeah.
That's important
Yeah.
stuff.
So you
So you're always prepared.
so you did it. You were out there. I love what you said about that. I love what you said about that there's moments in your life where you have those feelings, and those are, they don't come that often. For some of us that go out and do this stuff, they come more often than others, I think. But those are the moments.
Well, think of what your life is at the end of your life. I kind of believe it's a bunch of pictures, not a video. And there's going to be those moments. You remember the day you got married. You remember more the day you got divorced, but that's a whole other story. You remember your first child being born. You remember the drive home from the hospital with the baby the first time. Scariest drive of your life ever. These are moments that you will never forget. And I think the first time you leave sight of land on your boat is an experience like, shit. Now the problem is, if you don't know what you're doing, you're terrified, you can't let anyone know it.
Yeah.
So on the inside, yes, we did it. And the outside, oh shit. The first time you aim for an island and you hope it's really there.
Yeah, that it shows up out of the horizon at some point.
Right. The chart shows it's there. Everything looks like it should be there, but you don't really know if somebody screwed with the GPS stuff while you were gone, and Russia or somebody played with the satellites, and you're following your GPS coordinates, and you think you're there, and it's not. I remember when Keith was in, somewhere in Southeast Asia or something, and he's showing the chart that he's riding right over an island somewhere because the charts aren't that good and the GPS isn't that good.
It's like where I live.
You also learn how to, where you live, how to read the water.
Yeah.
You learn to see what the water looks like. Other thing, if you wear glasses, you better have two pairs. You better have more than one or two pair of sunglasses, especially if they're prescription. You're going to the third world. They ain't going to be able to get them for you.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to places where you can get things. And then to have things flown into you. I met a lot. It's kind of funny, but I have a bunch of friends now who are still stuck in Exuma. I shouldn't say stuck. They're loving their life in Exuma. But I keep mailing them part. I've had 7 different Starlinks sent to my apartment.
Really?
Yeah, and then I bring them over to Maker's Air or Staniel Key Air, and they fly them over to the Bahamas for them because they can't get them any other way. And now everybody's switching to Starlink.
Yeah, the whole Caribbean is
works.
switching to Starlink. It's funny. So we've talked a bit about the challenges you had getting into this, the amazing experiences that you've had in the life. Let's chat a bit about where you're at now, because Keith and I talk about often, that cruising is a series of highs and lows. There is these amazing, wonderful moments that are these, like, I love the way that you put that, these picture moments that you'll remember when you die. You'll go back and you'll look at and I love that I did this. It's the best thing that I ever did in my life. But in order to get there, you have to deal with these lows. And I think that a lot of people they underestimate the potential severity of the lows that they can go into when they get into this life. And so that's why I want you to share a bit about where you're at and some of the lows that you've gone through and are going
Okay.
through recently.
Okay. Well, concurrently, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? Your boat catches on fire.
Sure.
You get a check. You fight later. You get a check from the insurance company. And you start again with what you've learned.
Yep.
Okay. Then you then to me the lowest thing is do is something happens to your boat that you're not covered for.
Yep.
Now it's a whole other story. I was going between Exuma and Eleuthera, and we were buddy boating with a sailboat, and so I'm going at 1900, 2000 RPMs, pushing 6 knots. No big deal. Beautiful day, 2 foot seas coming off the quarter beam. You know, I think we're sitting on the front drinking pina coladas or something. And all of a sudden, one of the engines overheats, blows up, something doesn't work right, smoke is coming out of it. I go back, none of the alarms went off. I look at the gauges, they're not giving anything, the boat's getting hotter. So first thing I do is I turn off the port engine, and I realize that the temperature is getting even more warm. Now, I don't know if the gauge is bad or what it is, so I hit the other one in neutral, I restart the engines, maybe it's coolant to go in. I climb down into, going into the engine room is fine when the boat's cool. Try to go in there when it's hot,
Mhm.
and you don't want to touch anything, and you're wearing shorts. That's why the mechanics all wear long pants, if you didn't know that. So it's an interesting thing. I would keep a pair of like scrub pants or sweatpants nearby. You could throw them on if you have to get in your engine room when it's hot. Lesson learned. And you do that, and I realized that the smoke, the water, the radiator cap is smoking and all that stuff. So, well, darn it, I'm turning off the engine. I keep the hood up. I try to get the temperature down. And now I'm halfway between Exuma and Eleuthera, which is, what, a 45-mile ride. So I'm 20 miles from land. I have a buddy boat, it can get me on the radio, and we're talking. And so I go on one engine. We get into the marina. Now, how do you park a catamaran with one
It's
engine?
difficult.
Bumper boats.
It's difficult.
Bumper
Yeah.
boats. So, the girlfriend is, getting there, and I'm telling her, you got to throw the line, and we practiced throwing the line. We did all these things before. I said, I got one shot to make the throw here because I turned the boat, the wind's blowing me the wrong way. You got to get it to the person on the dock, and they got to tie it fast so that the wind can push the boat back in. So she stands there, she gets ready, she throws the line, and she misses. And she goes, I broke a nail. And I'm like, well, grab the line. You got to roll it in and throw it real quick. She goes, but my nail's broken. I'm like, I don't care. Which was, I think, our only fight on the trip was like, throw the effing line. So eventually we got to dock and all that. So now you're in the third world. I'm in Cape Eleuthera, which is southern part of Eleuthera. It's a beautiful place when your boat works. When your boat doesn't work and you're there for a while, now you got to find somebody who can help you. Well, they find me the local mechanic guy, and it's the cooling pump. So he takes the thing off, and they can't fix anything in the Eleuthera, so they have to fly it to
Oh my
Nassau.
God.
So $600 to fly it apart to Nassau. It comes back. I think they spray painted it. I don't think they did much other than doing that. He hooks it on. We start everything. We put coolant in it. Engine works fine. Everything's going. I'm excited. We start going again. After I let it idle for about 2-3 hours. Everything looks good. So we're ready to go. We pull out of the marina. I'm feeling good. I'm like, okay, I had my one hiccup
Mm.
for this trip. Well, about 35, 40 minutes later, now sirens are going off on the boat. Warning, overheating, engine lock, error code. Well, they give you like 30 error codes. What the hell do they mean? I don't know. At that moment in time, shut off the engine, wound up the whole thing locked up. Lost all. We checked the oil. You check the oil, you can see it's now creamy, which means that the coolant leaked into the oil. So we come back into Nassau on the one end, or back into Eleuthera on the one engine. I call the other guy, the mechanic. He meets me at the dock. A nice guy. I mean, he means well. He says, the header, you did something, you warped it. So they take off the head of the engine. This is 260 horsepower engine. I mean, it looks like heart surgery. I don't know what they're doing, but there's a lot of parts. And they do that. They take this whole part. They ship it to Nassau. Now, they only want cash. Nobody will take credit cards. Nobody will take a check. Nobody will take, there's no other way to do it. So, you bring $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 of cash with you. Well, that goes away really quickly when you start getting repairs. So now they tell, well, there's a bank in is it New Rock, Red Rock, or somewhere in Eleuthera, one of the about 40 minutes away. So you rent a car, you go to the bank, you want to get money. I said, I want to, let me wire you money, all that stuff. He goes, you need an
Oh
account.
my goodness.
I said, okay. I said, okay, I'll open an account. He says, you have to be a resident. I said, well, I'm not a resident. How do I get money? I said, can I wire it to your account? You're the bank. You give me money. No, we can't do that anymore. And this is about the same time that Sam Bankman-Fried with the FTX scandal is going on in Nassau. And so all the banks aren't doing anything. So I'm like, what do you mean? I go to the marina. How can you help me out? He goes, we don't carry much cash. Everything's done. So I can't use my ATM card doesn't work. The credit cards don't work in their machines. I called American Express and they said, yeah, it'll work in an ATM machine in Nassau. I said, it's an 80-mile swim. How is that going to help me? So I have no cash. So I realized the mechanics are doing all this stuff. I wound up flying in my own mechanic from Fort Lauderdale with cash. Every day I could only Venmo him so much money. So I got him $15,000 and come fly back so I have some money to do things with. So he comes, he tries to work with the guy. They can't get the engine started. I don't know, hydro-locked or hydro-sealed or whatever the name is. The thing won't move. Even after they put the new thing on, the question is, did they do it correctly? There's a timing off, the timing chain. I sent Chris information as we were going through this as I was ready to, do like Cortez and burn the boats.
As you were ready to pop the seacocks and let her go.
That's it. My luck, only half of it would sink and it would have nothing. So we finally do it. I have to get nobody can repair it. I have to get the boat home. Well, $22,500 later. Yes, 22,500. The boat comes back. Now, here you're on this gorgeous cruise. It took 6 days or 7 days to get a weather window. And you're sitting there, they're towing you. It's $10,000 a day, best cruise you've ever done, most expensive, clearly I've ever done. You get back into the marina. You need 2 boats to get down the New River here in Fort Lauderdale. So now I have to get people to show up and tell me what's wrong with the engine. How do I fix this? How do I move forward? And of course, I contacted the insurance company, and they send out inspectors, but nobody's done anything until we know what's wrong with it. Well, it's 2.5 weeks till I can get a mechanic to show up and look at the problem. So they look at the problem, they put the computer into the engine, and there's no error codes that show up. Nothing is determined what's wrong. So nobody really knows what's wrong with the engine at this point. But he says, well, the only thing we can do is we can redo the block, and we can put the thing back together, and the block will cost you $25,000, and it'll take 180 hours of labor at $180 an hour. So $32,000 in labor. I said, so you're going to take a new block, put all the old parts on it for $60,000 and not know what's wrong with the engine. I said, how much are new engines? That's kind of crazy. So new engines, they originally told me were about $25,000, $26,000 a piece. And I'm like, well, it's a lot easier to spend $25,000 than spend $60,000. So, of course, the engine isn't available. My boat's a 2017. They stopped making that engine in 2019. You can't get it. There's none on the market. There was a place in Bali that had one, but to ship it from Bali is 6 months, and who knows if it works. And there's no warranty or anything from it. So the only smart decision is buy a new engine. But they don't make it, so you have to buy the next, which is 270 horsepower. Well, the 270 horsepower won't work with the electronic control thing with the other engine that I have in the starboard side. So I have to buy 2 engines. And they tell me originally $50,000, $55,000. This is at the Miami Boat Show. I meet with the Volvo Penta people, and they tell me $50,000, $55,000. And I said, well, at least I'll be able to sell the engine that nobody else has. Somebody else might need it at some point. I should be able to sell it for the cost of the labor to put in the engines, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, whatever that labor cost is going to be. So about 2 weeks go by. They're working on the paperwork. I don't know how long it takes to do this kind of paperwork. It seems like you fill out a form and your engine shows up. They eventually said, we figured it out. It's going to be $78,000. I said, 78,000 and 52 don't look like they're in the same family. Well, there were cost rises and all this. Well, they know they have me. I have no other choice. He says, well, your controllers that you have won't work with it, and the screen you have
Oh my
won't work with
God.
the new electronics, and you're getting this stuff, and it's like, you know, at the end of the day, I just wrote it. I just wired money. It says they write a check, but now you have to wire money, and for $78,000, and I don't have the engines. And then I saw the guy at the Palm Beach Boat Show, which was last weekend from Volvo, and I said, "Has anybody? I'm paying in advance. Do we know if the engines work?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Has anybody turned them on, started them, make sure they were?" "Oh, we don't do that until after it's installed." I said, "So if I now pay the installation, have to have my boat towed to a marina, two tugboats to move it, have them lift it, put the new engines in, put it in the water, and then hit the start button, and it doesn't start." I said, "What happens then?" He says, "Well, then you have a warranty issue." I said, "What does that mean?" He says, "Well, we'll figure out what's wrong. We'll fix it." I said, "Are you paying the labor costs and the dockage costs and all that?" "No." I said, "So if the engine doesn't work I just bought, I'm on the hook for the whole thing. And then you'll do an insurance claim to your warranty, and hopefully they'll cover the problem." That's the world it is when you have to get a new boat. So I've hit now the low of the low. And, the good news is I'll have a 5-year warranty on 2 new engines. The engine won't be the next problem. It's going to be the generator, the water
It's gonna
maker.
be
It's going
something
to be
else.
some other the washer dryer. But I know the engines are good. So I've taken a mission critical thing, and I know that's going to work. Am I excited to go out and boating again? I hope I get there again. I'm suffering the knife in the chest wound from this, like, everyone taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
Between everything happening, I'll probably be $125,000 into this problem. And people say, "Oh, you got rich people problems." Well, maybe I was rich when this whole story started. I ain't rich anymore. Look at the stock market. The game has drastically changed. The value of the boat has precipitously dropped 20, 30,000 or 20, 30%. I mean, the market is a different place out there. Try to park your boat. They want $4,000 to $6,000 a month to park your boat here in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
So, you're got a boat that you're parking, you can't use it, and you're kind of sitting there trying to hope. What can you do? There's no option. Now, will the insurance cover it? Yesterday I found out that they want a diver to look at the boat. What in the world's a diver gonna do? They'll let them spend money on a diver. I'm sure at the end of the day, when you read through these insurance policies, they have all these things about mechanical problems, and unfortunately, if you get hit from the outside world, it's probably covered. If you hit a reef, it's probably covered. If you have the boat engine overheat, like in your car, if your car engine overheated and melted, nothing covers that.
Mm.
It's not part of your auto insurance. So you're in those things. And I mean, I can see if there's a negligent, that alarm went off, I didn't put coolant in, I didn't do things that were appropriate. But they found there were no engine errors. So
Right.
I sit kind of that way. So after towing the boat, it's sitting about 3 miles the other way over my back. It doesn't fit where my Intrepid is here. And I'm hoping to get it fixed. And I hope to get the love of going out there again. I probably will have to get reinfected by listening to more Keith and Chris stuff and watch more YouTube videos and get the bug again and go forward.
Right.
Or I'm just going to wind up on cruise ships where it's somebody else's problem.
That's slightly different on a cruise ship, but what I mean, out of all of that, what would you say are your biggest lessons learned?
Attitude. You can either wake up and be and for like 20 minutes, I was pissed off.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, when the second boat, when it went and I had to get towed in, I lost a hat because I threw it overboard. Damn, the 4-letter superlatives came out of me was pretty big. And I said, okay, how's this going to affect it? What's great about this? How can there's got to be some silver
Mm.
lining in this. And, I got to meet some of the dumbest people I've ever met. It makes everyone else look smarter, which I think is exciting. I watched things get done. I spent more time in a marina. I got bit by the biggest mosquito I've ever seen in my life. That never would have happened otherwise. And
I'm not sure
you
those are
know,
silver lining
you
things,
live
Brett.
life. Right. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And that's
I,
really the essence
I,
to it. If it doesn't kill you, the next time it happens, you're ready
yeah.
for it. So I have such tough intestinal fortitude that you can have an engine blow up. I mean, that's never going to bother me again.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been
Now,
through it.
people would say, "Why did you come back with one engine?" That was like the biggest complaint of everyone. Oh, just come back on one engine. I said, if you leave the marina on one engine in a vessel that's not seaworthy, you're not covered. If you could have sunk or something could have happened along the way, you have zero coverage. You made a poor nautical decision. Now, if you leave in a sailboat with an engine, you have two. Your boat had three forms of propulsion, two engines and a
Yeah.
sail. As long as you have two of them, like you would never leave if you had no engine. Yet there are sailboats that have no engines that leave all the
Yeah.
time. But it wouldn't be seaworthy vessel if you left with both engines. And those are those little clauses in the insurance
Yeah.
policy. I'd encourage you to really read them. I didn't read my policy well enough, or I would have said, of course I want this covered and that
Right.
covered. Now the reality is I didn't have a say in
Yeah.
it. It's not a buyer's market when it comes to insurance. You're very blessed that they'll even wave their hand over you and give you some
Yeah.
coverage.
Yeah. Okay.
And boating is not for poor people.
No.
At least Bluewater Cruising is clearly not for people who don't have some extra means on the
Yeah.
side. Prepare for losing everything, and if you're okay with that, then damn, get out there.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to lose everything. It's going to be better if you plan for the worst. You'll be ready for anything less than that.
Yeah. Okay. So you talked a bit about, where you're at right now, which is you're not in the highs, you're in the lows, dealing with a big problem. And one of the worst problems you can deal with, which is a catastrophic engine failure. Probably the worst problem you can deal with on a powercat. Because it's
Yeah. Short of sinking.
But
sinking would have been
better because the boat would have been covered. Yeah.
A fire would have been
Yeah.
better. I would have got a new boat.
Yeah.
I'd already be having my
Yeah.
new boat.
Yeah.
So you got to take what you have. I remember Keith called me up, and I think he was in Saudi Arabia or somewhere. He called me up. He goes, "Oh, you'll get over it. It ain't going to be that bad." And I tell him the story. He goes, "Well, maybe it's going to be bad for a while, but then you'll get over it."
Yes. Yeah. You're in it, man.
So I do find the brotherhood of the Bluewater Cruising Group, and especially the program you guys have put together, because I think we all feel like kindred spirits on the same mission.
Amazing.
And I think we feel relatively blessed to have your experience. And then you now have this, hundreds of people who have shared their life experience and their little intricacies, that my story about the engine might help somebody else I would never have had the opportunity of having intersection with.
It absolutely will.
So I think the collective entity of it takes a village, is really what makes this exciting. I get calls all the time from people I met out boating, and boating's are the friendliest people in the world. Everybody wants to help each other, and nobody cares what your background is. Whether you're the school teacher or you're the guy who owns a gold mine I met. The guy with the huge 65-foot yacht who wants to be a sailor now. I mean, he bought a 70 Sunreef after riding with me. And he says, "I'm never going to put the sails up, but in case, it'll look really good in the pictures." So I told him, "I think you're going to put them up." And he says, "Well, yeah, I'll hire a crew."
There you go.
To do this. So I think you got to be prepared. The tools you need to have. I mean, I have $1,000 in tools Keith talked me into. Things you wouldn't think of. Magnets to pick things up that you drop. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
You're dealing with some screw or some washer, and now you can't reach it. And of course, I bought stainless steel screws, and they don't come up with a magnet.
Yeah.
So I had to buy grabbers.
So, okay. So, I mean, you've been through a lot in getting into this, getting going. You've experienced a lot of high. You've had some good times, some great times, and now you're in some of the lows. We don't get to pick what happens to us. Things we can influence it. I believe. I mean, outside of Bluewater Cruising, I just believe in general, like we have very little control on as to what happens in our lives. We can try and influence the direction that we go to the best of our ability, but ultimately we're on this ride and things are going to show up in our life, and
Right.
what we can control is our attitude and how we deal with them.
Right. You want to mitigate the stuff you can mitigate, but the stuff you can't,
Attitude.
don't ride the wrong direction on a
Yeah.
highway.
Yeah.
You'll be in
Sure.
trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got influence over that.
You don't want to do
Yeah.
stupid stuff. You don't want to do stupid stuff, but there's enough stupid people out there. I don't know, it was from your class or somewhere I read it. It was like boating is doing repairs in exotic
We talk
locations.
about that. Yeah.
Uh, right, and it's a big thing. Now the question is, are you the repair
Yeah.
kind of guy? Are you the person who? Am I the person who's going to get in there, or am I the person who's going to call somebody?
Yeah.
I'd rather, it's weird that I used to think my hands were important when I operated, but now I don't do that. So, but I still think my hands are important, or I don't have the strength I once had. I don't have the agility I once had. So some of these things are not easy. And these boats were built by people who were 5'1",
Mm.
who can squeeze into parts that the rest of us can't get into. And there was one where Keith had to change his air compressors or something on his boat. I remember some videos of that. Right. If he didn't have kids, he'd be hot.
Yeah.
Okay. He had people who were small enough to do the job.
Yeah.
But you would think when you go to buy a boat, start thinking about how do I get to the mission critical air conditioning's a mission critical item. Maybe you want to carry a backup air conditioner you can plug in with an external vent, which I did. I bought one for $160 at Home Depot because air conditioning was a mission critical. It sat in the cabin. I never turned it on.
Yeah. So having gone through what you've gone through, the highs and the lows, what would be, if you had to summarize things into like one piece or two pieces of advice or suggestions for people that want to go blue water cruising, what would be the big things?
There was somebody who wrote something. I can't remember which philosopher. It says, if you wait for all the traffic lights to be green before you leave your house, you're not going to go anywhere. And I don't remember who said it, but in essence, if you stayed home, shit's going to happen. I mean, if you stayed home and, you get to 60 years old, every week you get a phone call about some friend who has a disease, has cancer, got in a car accident, broke a hip. Life is going to happen for you. So there's no better time than now. And if you wait again for everything to be working with you,
there's no perfect time.
I know so many people who spent their whole patients of mine who spent their whole career saving. They're going to retire, and when they retire, they're going to do this. And as soon as they retire, a spouse gets sick. Somebody comes down with a disease. A kid, a grandchild is born prematurely. All of a sudden, all your assets now go to some other place you weren't planning on. And they said, if you want to make God laugh, tell her your plans. And so I just can't imagine living your life with the idea that, why not try? If you wait for everything to be perfect, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
If you want a perfect boat, get a canoe.
Okay.
Because they're pretty much perfect. They don't sink, and if they sink, you turn the water out, and you start again.
Fair enough. No engines.
There's nothing. You want something that can go. Nothing can go wrong. Something is going to go wrong, and you just want to try to mitigate all the things that you can take care of. Have a bunch of batteries for your satellite phone. Know the phone numbers of who you're going to call. Make sure you have somebody at home who's watching you on, get one of the, either Predict Winds monitoring system or Garmin's thing, so people know where you are. Send float plans. You don't want to wind up where, God forbid, they have to take you off in a helicopter because something happened and leave your boat somewhere. I mean, how many boats are left a year to float?
Yeah, many.
And that goes on. That goes on quite a bit. So you want to mitigate your expenses. And again, if you have, let's take a number, you have $1 million. Don't buy a boat more than $400,000.
Yeah.
Because if you lost it, you can still live okay. But if you buy an $800,000 boat with your $1 million and something happened and you had problems with it, you're in trouble. And Walmart got rid of the people who sit there who say welcome to Walmart with the the vests on. So it's hard to find those good happy jobs.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I don't really have any other questions. I think that's it's a good place to wrap her up. Anything else that you want to add that you'd like to share? Or...
Well, I would say that I would like to see this environment become more bidirectional. I mean, when I was in your founding group of classes, there's still a couple people I keep in track with. I visited one of them when I was in Puerto Rico, and I was driving through there, and we went out to lunch. I think we sent you pictures with Josh and I. And it was a great thing. But that experience seems to dwindle as time
Mm,
goes on. And whatever we can do to keep updating, I know that, time constraints are a big entity, but you don't actually have to be there. There might be somebody in one of your classes who's a master mechanic
mm,
in something who can help somebody out. Or, I get calls from people who have medical issues all the time. We're all happy to help everybody out. I mean, I think that's the essence of this cruising community. And, again, if you're in a powerboat, you go straight.
yeah,
You don't have to go around
yeah,
stuff. You just don't go as
yeah.
far. So they're different worlds. And what's interesting is people on sailboats like spending time on powerboats, and people on powerboats like spending time on
It's true.
sailboats. There's people do tend to move, and it's seeing you move. You ever watch little kids play soccer? They all tend to be a swarm, and they run together with the ball, no matter where they're going. It's a swarm mentality. I think that's
Yeah,
cruising. Cruising is a swarm mentality where you got a bunch. Everyone recognizes that going on their own somewhere is doable, but stupid. You don't want to be somewhere where, God forbid, you have a problem and nobody can get to you for a day.
yeah,
So somebody's going to get to you a couple hours, even if they're 10 miles, 15 miles away. And if you can't get a helicopter or something, some big boat will stop by and help you. You're never that far alone. I mean, you go to the Pacific, maybe you're a couple days from help. You're in the Caribbean, you're a couple hours from
absolutely.
help. It's a different
Yeah,
world. So don't get worried about the stuff that can go wrong. Worry about I had this dream. I was going to Chat and Chill and going to have a whatever their drink was. I forgot what it was, some sort of punch something in Georgetown. I always wanted to go there. I always wanted to go under that little bridge in Georgetown where the road is, where everyone goes in the dinghy. I watched it in 20 people's YouTube videos. I did that. Another photo goes in my mental part, in my brain. I accomplished it. Sir Edmund Hillary climbed, all the mountains, the seven
yeah,
peaks. Dick Bass did the same thing. And in his book, why? Because it's there. Why in the world miss it? And if you haven't been in the waters of Exuma, you have Nassau is not Bahamas. It's what everyone sees on a cruise ship. My daughter, who came to spend time with me, was I don't want to go to Nassau again. Dad, we had a house, and you had an apartment in the Paradise Island, and for years we went there 30 times. I don't want to go again. When she finally got to Exuma, oh my God, I've never seen this
yeah.
before. This is so cool. And there with all the pictures. Record life. A life worth recording is worth living. Worth living is worth recording, I guess that's the idea. Journal, write the things you like. And, anyone can be a YouTube star, even Keith.
Okay, that's a great place to end it. Awesome, guys. So thanks again, Bret, for taking the time to sit down and chat with me on this. Lots of great little nuggets of wisdom in there that you said. I love that piece where you said, what is it? Knowledge is things that you learn on your own. Wisdom is learned from others. I think I got that right. And there's a lot in there, a lot of wisdom in here, I think, that people can take from your experiences and what you've experienced so far going through this. So I hope the journey, personally, I want to say I hope the journey continues for you. I hope you get through this bump in the road, though it is a significant bump, and you find a way to get back out there, because I love hearing your stories. So, and to everybody that's watching, thanks again, guys, for checking out the podcast. If you want to learn more about what we do, the programs that we offer, just check out www.bluewatercruising.com. And somebody there will get in touch with you. If you click one of the buttons there to get in touch with us, we'll get in touch back with you and get you the details. So thanks again, and we'll see you guys next time.